Now, another one that the peacemaker came upon in his travels, he wasn't with Hewenta at this time, and from time to time they were separated and would do things on their own, because this took a long time to travel like that and to spread this message. And they said that during one of his times away from Hewenta, that the peacemaker was traveling on one of these paths. And a long time ago they talk about it and they say, oh, maybe the people are on a war path. And how people were able to get around in the woods was, back in those days, they walked on a path. And the path would take you sometimes different directions, and certain paths were used for different things. And they say that there actually used to be for real war paths from one place to the other, and that these war paths were made so that a warrior could run, or a group of warriors could travel, and they know the paths and they know where they go and what direction they're going. And they said there was so much warfare that these war paths were really worn into the ground. And they said that at a crossroads where a couple of these war paths crossed like that, there was this one single house. And that this one single house, there was a lady that lived there by herself, and that she was in there cooking up a storm. She was just cooking. And back in those days, warriors must have always been hungry because they couldn't cook. They couldn't make a fire and cook all the time that they wanted to when they were at war. Because as I said earlier, if you make a fire, what does it do? It sends up the smoke. And you send up the smoke, you tell your enemy where you are and that you're eating or what you're doing. And smoke would only be sent up during war times to give a signal about something. Maybe a location or something that's going on. Maybe the location of a battle. Well, this lone woman, they say she was Onondaga, that she was a Seneca lady, and she was up to no good, really. Some versions of the story say what she liked to do was she liked to hear all the terrible things, the fierce stories about war. And that what she did was she would cook food, and because those warriors weren't able to make a fire or cook like they wanted to, they could smell her good cooking from a long ways. And they could smell, like if you were starving, you could smell food too, a lot better. And she's at home just cooking away, and when the warriors show up there, she welcomes them in. Oh, come on in, she says. Come in and eat. And it's our way that if you have company at your house, that you feed them. And it's also our way that if someone offers you food, the polite thing to do is to take some. Because if you don't, you kind of insult them. So, this woman at this house would have that food ready in case warriors came by. And when a group of warriors came there, oh, she'd like that. And she'd tell them, oh, come on in, take a rest, have something to eat. And she'd feed them. And they were let their guard down a little bit because they thought, oh, just a nice old lady. She can't do us no harm. We're tough warriors. And the story goes that she would make the food and serve it to them. And while they're all sitting in there in her house, she'll tell them, well, you can pay for this food. And I want to hear your war stories. She says, tell me what you've been doing. And the warriors would sit down and they'd eat and they'd tell her what was going on. Oh, geez, we had a battle with this one and that one, and this one got killed, and oh, gee, this is how it went, and oh, she'd get excited about that, and she liked it. And she'd say, oh yeah, then what happened, And these young guys, these warriors, telling their story. They get just about done with their story, and then all of a sudden they'd fall over dead because she poisoned the food. And they said that, of course, that's not a nice thing to do. And of course, that's an evil way to be. And that was what she did. And they said that this lady living at this crossroads got all set up. And sure enough, the peacemaker showed up and went in the door. Oh, she says, Sadakoni, come in and eat. And the peacemaker goes in and sits down and he starts eating. And she says, oh, you can pay for the food. She says, tell me your war stories. And of course, he's the peacemaker. He has no stories of war. And he starts to tell her. He starts to tell her about this great message of peace. And that talking and the good mind should replace war and killing. And that all the war that's happening makes the Creator sad. And that everyone has the right to a healthy mind, body, and spirit. And the peacemaker told her about Gaianas Hatgoa. And she says, oh, she says, stop right there. She says, she says, it sounds like a nice story. She says, but I don't know how it's going to work. She says, how's it going to work over here? And the peacemaker told her this. He said that I'm going to bring the people into a house of peace. And he said that all of you people, you Haudenosaunee, you build longhouses. She says, yeah. And he says that I'm going to make it so that there's going to be peace in this whole house. And he said that just like in a longhouse, he said maybe a whole bunch of families live in there. She says, yeah. And he said that in this house, let's say we have 5 fires or 5 families, and that these 5 families all are equal. She says, okay, yeah, I understand that. And she said, let's say that each one of these 5 families has their own fire to cook and keep warm. They've got their own fire, each one of them. She says, yeah, that's true. And he says, well, let's say that, isn't it true that there is no family that is the boss family of the house? Everybody's equal, right? And she said, yeah. This family doesn't boss this one, or this one doesn't boss the other ones. She says, yeah, that's how it goes. He said, well, I'm going to bring all of these nations into a house of peace. And in this house of peace, each nation will have its own fire, will have its own way of making decisions that affect just their family or just their nation. If there's something to decide that is a very local decision, then they can do it. They can take care of their own business. But if it's something that's going to affect the whole house, then they'll talk it out and they'll work it out and they'll have a council fire. And that each nation will have its own fire, but if it's something to pertain to the whole house, they'll get together and they'll have a grand council and they'll decide it together. And this woman, she said, you know, that makes a lot of sense. And I do see and I understand how it could work. And this woman became known as Jigon Sase, a new face, Jigon Sase, because she showed a new face for peace. And she told the peacemaker, from now on, whenever I encounter people, the warriors, I'm going to tell them about your plan, about your Guyana's Hatgowa, and about your great peace. And that I think it can work. And, you know, the peacemaker decided at that time that because the oldest woman in each one of these longhouses, the way that things were set up was that a clan, a whole family or clan would live in one longhouse. Let's say, just for the sake of it, that this house is where people of the Turtle Clan live. And that if there's something that can't be decided, the oldest woman in that house would make the decision. So he said that we're going to have it so that this house would be represented in the great law, and the one to choose who's going to speak for them, who's going to be the chief or the one to go to Grand Council and speak for his family and for his longhouse and his clan, will be lifted up and will be selected by the clan mother. And she became known as the mother of nations. And they said that decisions will be left to the clan mothers, because the clan mothers and the women were smarter than the men, because they didn't let their pride and their lack of judgment get in the way of having peace. And that a clan mother was way less likely to call for war and put her grandsons and her husband in danger, and her family in danger, by having war. So it was decided that the really clan mothers would kind of run the show. And a lot of people have a wrong idea about a chief, because he serves the people. He's not a king or anything like that. That's how the Europeans were living, not us. And that this idea of peace would be much stronger if left in the hands of the ladies, the women, and their decision. So now you see how this whole idea of being longhouse people came to be. And it was decided that she would be known as the mother of nations.